Hi there, and welcome to the Couples Expert Podcast. This is Stuart Fensterheim, the Couples Expert. Today, here in Scottsdale, Arizona, it is a wonderful day, and I have on my show today a guest that I met in a very interesting kind of way. I had a guest on my show just recently talking about money, and she introduced me to Emily Bouchard. And Emily is one of those people that when we began to talk a little bit about what she does, I got very excited. I got excited because she works with families about money issues. And most of us, when we think of money, we think of boring and numbers. But what she does and what she does with families is really allows them to understand what the triggers about money are really about. And as all of you know, I'm all about triggers. We talk about triggers and connection and how to really make sure you and your partner have a relationship where you both feel that you have each other's back and that you have a connection that is a very significant, deep one. And what I know about money is that money is one of those topics that more than anything pulls people apart and has them feel very disconnected. And not only do they feel disconnected, but what they begin to do is look at their partner and say, this person definitely does not have my back. And Emily and I spoke briefly on the phone a while ago. And what I felt immediately is her kindness, her giving, and her incredible desire to really help families feel important to one another. And there's nothing more important than that. And she lives in San Francisco area, Marin, California. And it's one of those cities that is really, really fun. So more than anything, I want to have a great time today. So Emily, welcome to my show. And thank you for giving of yourself today.
Oh, thank you, Stuart. Wow, what an incredible intro. That was wonderful. I don't think I've ever had myself described like that before. And I'm so touched to be seen. I can see why you're so good at what you do. Like, you just go right to the heart of it. And that's what I do with families. So it's very nice to have that reciprocated.
Yeah, I think that is really the key. I think in family work or working with couples, unless you really do get to the heart of the issues, all you're doing is going round and round and round in circles. And money does that to people.
Oh, yeah, it's really quite something in terms of how we interface with money every day of our lives. And we're so completely unskilled on how to do it effectively because we haven't ever been shown to. And everything's the opposite, right? How to avoid it, and anything that I can do to support people and feeling more comfortable around that conversation can really help to mitigate a lot of unnecessary, I like to call it mischief in relationships. And I want to be really clear that I don't come at this from a money background. Like, I don't have any training as a financial person. I have a social work degree and a child development degree and my marital and family therapy specialty, and then started doing coaching and switched from therapy to coaching, much like your counseling that you do in terms of really bringing people the tools that will make it so they can be the most successful in their relationships.
You know, what's interesting about your background as you talk about that is I would love to know a little bit is what your path for yourself was, because as a social worker, getting involved with the counseling field and now ending up working primarily with money. Tell me a little bit about your own path professionally and a little bit about your personal life as well, if you don't mind sharing that.
Oh, no, I'm happy to. I think it's really important. And, if I'm asking people to open up their hearts around some of the most painful issues they have around conflict, around money, I want to be able to show up that way as well. I don't have anything to hide about that. It was a very non-linear route, let's say. I didn't know it existed. So I became really fascinated about child development when I worked at a camp for children who were physically ill when I was 18. And I studied all different aspects of children. And then when I was working in a hospital, after I graduated from college and did various things, I kept seeing the impact on the family system when a child was sick. And I got really fascinated about family dynamics and how do you communicate, how do you have great ways of relating when there's tremendous challenges, emotionally charged situations, important decisions you have to make, and when life is on the line. And so I went and got a social work degree with an emphasis on marital and family therapy with that in mind. And then I ended up moving out to California, and I met my former husband, and we fell in love, and he had two teenage daughters. And I found myself in the trenches. Like, I was actually in it. Like, wow, wait, all the stuff I studied, what actually works? And I started a group for couples that had stepchildren. And I also started a group for stepmoms because I'm always interested in, wow, what are the tools that work? And I was in it myself. And I started writing about it before blogging was even happening. It was late 90s. And I started a newsletter and ended up writing articles and writing ebooks about what I was learning about what really made a difference in blended families and step families being successful and really cultivating healthy relationships. And then this is so interesting. When my marriage started to come apart and we were separated, he moved to another country that I didn't want to move to. I was really soul searching and looking at what's next. And I was referred to an organization called the Money Coaching Institute because I needed to heal some of my wounding around what was going on in my marriage in terms of money. And found that the Money Coaching Institute provided a lot of what I needed. And it was also dovetailed with another aspect of my work. So in 2003, I launched my blended family practice online. And in 2004, I was referred to a company through an acquaintance, somebody who didn't know me very well, but had seen me in a leadership role. And he referred me to this company that worked with high net worth families, people with 25 million or more. And they were looking at how to transition their wealth successfully and keeping the family together, because research shows that 70% of the time families blow apart when money gets transferred and wealth gets transferred and family businesses get transferred. And
Let me hold you right there, because I want my listeners to really understand when you talk transferred. Could you elaborate a bit on what that means?
It's such a jargony term. Thank you so much. So it could be something like sudden money, where a parent or your parents pass away and you suddenly find out that they had a huge life insurance policy, and you didn't even know you were going to be getting this money. Or sometimes it may be that you have a family business and you're looking at, wow, who's going to own the business? Who's going to run the business? How do we make it fair when it might not necessarily be equal? That's a major issue that we work a lot with families around.
When you say not equal, meaning different members of the family might have a different portion of the business?
Yes, or maybe some will have rights to actually make decisions, while others will be owners but not have a say in the decisions.
Oh my gosh, that I can imagine. So selling a business, not selling a business, all those things that might happen. Not everyone's going to
Distribution.
get a say.
Yeah, whether you're going to distribute money to the owners or whether you're going to reinvest it in the company. Yeah, there's a lot there.
Okay.
So really helping people sort all that out. And then my specialty with the blended families brings this whole other layer of complexity, because you might have conflicts of interest between a step parent who may be benefiting from the income from the business and the children that are needing to have it be sustained. And the step parent might want the maximum taken out while the kids might want to keep it in. Or ownership of shared properties, where you might have step siblings where some have ownership of properties that others are benefiting from. So it gets very complicated very quickly. And helping people sort that out, I found that I did about 6 months of research to find out if I could be useful in the field, because I didn't have a financial background. But what I realized and discovered, as I'm sure you're aware of, Stuart, is families are families. And there's so much we can do for them. And what happens is the more money you have, your issues become more complex, but it's more, we call it, it's like wax on wood, where it amplifies whatever is there. And so what we do is really help people kind of diffuse those emotional landmines that can get exploded around money. And we help people communicate more effectively and also resolve resentments and hurts and those sorts of things that have a lot of expression through fights around money when it's not really about the money.
And I would imagine what it's usually about is security and stability.
Right. And also love.
Well, how we define that.
Exactly. Because if you have a parent that has demonstrated their love for family and their family value as producing and creating this foundation of finance, it gets collapsed. The love and money gets collapsed in these families a lot of the time, and in most families. And so, wait, you got this support from mom and dad, and you got this kind of financial support, and I didn't. Does that mean they love you more? And that builds up a lot of resentments and hurts. And it happens no matter how much money you have, but it's always there if you don't have a way of being able to talk about it as a family. And that's what I love supporting people in, is how to have those conversations well.
You know what's really interesting about what you're saying? Because when you use the metaphor of landmines, which I love the metaphor, by the way, because the question that immediately popped into my head was, how do I not step on that landmine and get blown up? Because I recall, and this is sort of the metaphor I'm using, I took a trip to Israel a number of years ago, and there was a kibbutz that we were visiting, and there was a hill right outside the kibbutz. And the guy who was the tour guide was saying, you know, you don't want to walk there because there are still landmines from the 1960 war. So, and that said, oh my gosh, there are things that are sitting dormant that someone can step on. And that's really the issue, isn't it? There are so many things that never get talked about as families, how we get along with the halves and the steps. And what does that really mean? And when someone passes away, all that stuff just comes to the surface.
Yeah, there's so many analogies that people can really relate to. And I have to tell you, like, a little outtake here, that of all the places you travel to, my business partner, Jamie Traeger Muni, actually, she and her husband moved to Israel from the Bay Area in 2009 to further the peace process there. That's her husband's passion. And so
Right.
they're living there. And it's quite something to be working with weekly over, Zoom or Skype, and having her be in Israel when she is having to deal with this on a regular basis physically, and we bring this into our work emotionally. And I think you're right on. And there's other analogies that people really relate to, because we tend to think that anytime we go to a conversation that could be really loaded, that it would explode because maybe it has in the past, it hasn't gone well, and we experience it in our bodies like it is that emotional explosion landmine. And what we like to do is let people know that we understand that that's the experience, and we can diffuse those, and also have people think about them in terms of electric fences. Have you ever been to a home where somebody has a dog and they have an electronic fence for the dog as opposed to a physical one? Well, families have these. And when I work with families, we interview all the family members, including the in-laws, and they're great. They can tell me all the electric.
They'll tell you the real stuff.
Oh, yeah. You don't want to go there. Don't. They'll be really clear about where the electric fences are, because they married into it, and they hit up against it pretty much right from the get-go. And so what we do is we show people how you can turn the voltage down on that, and you can also make it so it's, it might sting, but it's not an explosion. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to annihilate you. You don't have to be terrified of this. It's uncomfortable. And if you get the little ouch, it means, ooh, there's something here that we need to really take some time to honor and address. And then it becomes something you can get excited about instead of terrified about.
You know, as an emotionally focused therapist, and I deal all the time with couples with their cycles. And one of the things I tell couples is the way to beat a cycle, the first step is you have to know it's there. And as I hear you talking about these electric fences, if it's an invisible electric fence, now we're really in trouble, because we don't even know it's there until we've touched it. And I would say more often than not, that's even a bigger challenge.
Oh, yes, especially the first time it happens. It's so shocking. And you know what happens in a person's body, right? It's a physiological experience. And immediately the protections come up. And then our system is set up in such a way that's like, don't go there, right? Every part of us, it's so counterintuitive to soften, to become like open and receptive and say, wow, I just said or did something that really impacted you. I mean, I can give you a great example.
Please.
It's not about money, but it'll really give a sense for this. I married into this family. I moved in, and I had a 16-year-old teenage stepdaughter, and she was in the living room, and she had no problem telling me her upsets. She was one was passive aggressive, the other was just out there. And I had just done laundry, and I came into the living room and I said, "Hey, would you be, can you help me fold the laundry?" And she blew up at me. I experienced it completely as an emotional landmine. Like I walked into the living room and I exploded an emotional landmine. And there was something about that moment that was really pivotal for me because I knew in that moment I hadn't done anything to warrant that experience, right? I literally just asked her to help me fold the laundry.
Mm-hmm.
She was furious. And there was something in me that said, wow, there's something here. And I had enough training that I was able to like bring myself back to my center. So that's really important that I work with couples on. I'm sure you must as well. And in families, which is taking some breaths, getting back, like I'm totally fine and safe in this moment. What's going on over there? And so I just asked her, wow. And I met her energy too. And that's something that I show people to do is like, I didn't just go, oh, did I upset you? No, it's like, whoa, you are really furious with what I just said or did. What did I just do? What just pissed you off so badly? And she just yelled at me and she said, you asked me to help. And oh my God, it's never going to be enough. And once I help you with this, you're going to ask me the next thing. And then my mom never, and all this stuff came out. Like it was this unbelievable amount of emotion that had been under the surface. And all I did was listen. And the only phrase I said was, oh my gosh, tell me more. Tell me why. I just let her have it all. And there was no part of me that was afraid or upset because I really kept feeling like, oh, thank goodness there it goes. That's something that's been in between us that hasn't let us connect.
And what's really interesting about what you're saying is, and you let her know by saying, tell me more, that you're interested in her perspective and that you want to meet her right there because you care about her upset.
Yes. And I wasn't sure there were going to be no repercussions. Like that was really important too. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so after she finished, I then, got quiet with her. I said, thank you so much for telling me. I had no idea. So good to get to know you better. And it sounds like using the word help was a real trigger word for you. And it would be better if what would be more useful? And she said, well, just, let me ask if I'd be willing, to
do me a favor.
Yeah, to fold laundry with you. I'm like, oh, I can totally do that. And it was this wonderful experience of instead of like, oh my God, I can never ask her to help me do anything, to I can totally find out, is this a semantic thing? Is this, and then it was fine. And we laughed and folded the laundry together afterwards. And it was a really powerful experience for me in terms of what it means in the moment to choose relationship and connection in the face of that kind of intensity and anger.
And not be afraid of it.
Right, exactly. And I can tell you, it's interesting because I started talking about my separation and my eventual divorce. The money types work that I got trained in at the Money Coaching Institute really helped me with this with my divorce with my husband. Because we navigated it really well up until we hit up against a really powerful sticking point because I had promised to pay for some schooling he did in India when he was looking at studying there with the idea that he would go and study and then come back. And when he decided he wanted to move there, he still wanted me to pay for the course, but he had broken some promises to me in the course of going there that we had agreed upon before he went. And so my experience was I didn't need to fulfill that agreement. And he didn't believe that the two were contingent. And we really were at loggerheads. And it was the one sticking point in our divorce that we couldn't agree on. And so we hired money coach from the Money Coaching Institute where I had been training. And she helped us navigate that one sticking point really powerfully so that we were able to both see each other's points of view, understand where the disconnect was happening from our different money types. And then we were able to come up with a creative solution that worked for both of us so that my values were honored, and the agreements that we had were honored, and that, there was a way in which he still got some financial remuneration for other aspects of his life and our life that weren't.
What was the tool, or what, I think a lot of connection is so emotional. A tool or a technique is never going to be the answer. But in what you were talking about, what's your perspective as how did she help the two of you be able to have that dialogue? Because it's really about having the right conversation.
Exactly. And she did with us what I do with the couples that I work with. And it's this really fascinating exploration of money archetypes, the 8 most common archetypes that we have related to money. And they're based on Carl Jung's archetypes. So if people aren't familiar with that, all it means is we have these certain adaptive strategies and behaviors of relating. And when we go under stress, we tend to fall into a whole pattern of behavior. And as opposed to thinking about each of the behaviors separately, Jung looked at it like, oh, we have these different personas that come forward, and there's different aspects of ourselves. And with money, every single one of us has all 8 of the most common archetypes. And when you understand all the different players, you get to be empowered and have choice about who's front and center. So she likened it to like we were on the stage and we were acting out a scene in a play, and that was our life. And in that moment, my victim and martyr archetypes were really activated because I felt so offended and hurt, and like I did so much for you and now you're doing this to me. That's a very martyr archetype. Everybody's familiar with this. It's in our culture on every level. And his archetype that was really front and center was more of the fool. This.
You say fool?
Yes, fool. Like always landing on their feet, very optimistic. And he was just, he was like, nope, this is what we agreed to. And then his tyrant came out a little bit. Like he was very insistent and he was being pretty harsh with me, judgmental. Like when you hear those kind of controlling and harsh statements, the tyrant archetype is pretty front and center. So on the stage, you can see his tyrant and my martyr were really at loggerheads. We were not getting along. It was just in that one area, was a really contentious point.
Where would people go to really, if they want to get more information on these archetypes? Is there something that they could Google or get more information?
Yeah, and I have a paper that I wrote about it that gives the assessment for the archetypes, so people can take that, and then it gives a really good explanation of it.
Oh, terrific. So what we'll do is we'll just, if people are interested, it'll be on the show notes how to go about getting that. So if you could get that to me, that would be great. And then everyone can.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure I sent it to your assistant, and I also sent it to them. I'm happy to. And if you're really curious, the woman who really explains these in a beautiful way for couples is Deborah Price. And I love that her name is Price when she's a money coach.
Right.
And she has a couple books, Money Magic, and then I think it's The Heart of Money, which is one for couples. And Jamie, my business partner, wrote the foreword for that one. And really wonderful understanding of how these archetypes are at interplay in our relationships. And it's fascinating. Like when I studied this, it was this huge aha for me because and the one thing I want to tell you, Stuart, that's fascinating is our money types, the ones that are most prominent for us, like center stage, are completely formed by the time we're 7.
Really?
So it's not like we have to get really familiar with these characters because we need to understand that we're always going to default to one, and we need to consciously and intentionally bring forward other ones.
And I actually looked up The Heart of Money
Yeah.
It's called A Couple's Guide to Creating True Financial Intimacy, which I love this title.
Yeah, and she's fantastic. It's an easy read, and I think the assessment is in that book. It's definitely in Money Magic, and I think it's in that one as well. And she talks about the passive archetypes and the more dominant ones, and she helps people understand the different dynamics that can happen in couples. And for me, it was really eye-opening because my husband and I always had challenges financially, and I could never understand why. Like, we were both successful in what we were doing, and yet we were really impacted financially. And then when I found out that his predominant archetype is the fool and mine is the innocent, it was like a recipe for disaster, right? Because the fool's gonna be like, hey, let's invest in this Brooklyn Bridge, and the innocents could go, okay, no due diligence, no taking grounded, researched approach to making investments,
And no fear.
and no fear. We're going to be totally great. This is going to be awesome. And I want to be clear: all of the archetypes have positives and negatives. So the fool's great in terms of allowing you to be able to take risks. You just want to have a really good warrior right next to the fool to make sure that you're doing your research, you're doing your background checks, you're making sure that what you're up to is legitimate. And without that, you can get into some serious trouble. And so it's been this really amazing process for me in applying this in my own life to take responsibility for my finances. I'm saving really regularly now. I'm debt free. I've got my retirement going, all the sorts of things that I had not had the capacity to do when I was really connected with the fool archetype as my husband. So it's been this amazing journey, and the archetypes were very empowering for me, and I find it so helpful for the couples I work with.
I do a weekend retreat called 2 Days and 7 Conversations to help people really understand the process of their cycle. And one of the things we do on one of the days is looking at our childhood caretaker attachments to us, whether they were anxious, whether it was a secure place. And what we found and what we know with attachment theory is how we are in as an adult relationship, and whether or not we believe our partner's going to meet our needs has a lot to do with those childhood experiences with our caretaker growing up. It sounds very much like the money issues really relate to that very well. And that's maybe where the archetypes come from.
Well, yeah, that's what's so powerful, right? Because they're often formed from very young ages,
Because
right?
you said 7 a little bit ago, right?
Well, that's where it's solidified, but it's happening from the time, that whole time when we're developing our trust, we're adapting our strategies for getting our needs met. Absolutely. And it's completely in sync with what you do as well, because there's so many different layers to these money types. I can tell you a story from when I was 5. I convinced my dad. I don't know how I did it. I asked him if I could get one of those clown cones in Baskin and Robbins. I always looked at them and they were so adorable, and he agreed to get me one, which I remember being so surprised, which lets me know by the time I was 5, I asked for things and was told no a lot.
Because you didn't expect them to give you the things
No,
you
I
needed.
did not. And it was a big deal for me to ask. And then he got it for me, and we went outside and I took a lick. And what do you think happened?
What?
The ice cream fell out of the ice cream cone because it had been in the freezer.
Right.
And I looked down at it and I looked up at my dad. It's like the most vivid memory I have from that time. And I just I knew I couldn't ask for another one. And I knew I couldn't cry. Like, I literally had embodied, you can't cry over spilled milk.
And that was at 5, you said, right?
Yeah, exactly. And later on, I asked my dad as an adult when I was doing this course, and I remembered that. I said, Dad, what was it about you that when that ice cream cone fell out, you didn't march back into Baskin Robbins and demand another ice cream, because they obviously made a mistake? Who gives a kid an ice cream cone that's going to fall out?
Mm-hmm.
And he laughed. He said, I have no idea. I thought, wow.
And the impact.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the kinds of memories that totally shape these money types in us, right? That was my innocent getting formed. Like, don't ask. be happy with what you get, but then also my martyr got formed. Like, oh, I can't ask for more. It's so interesting.
Because I don't deserve it.
Yeah, or because it's not allowed, or because
It's not okay, or it means as I hear with couples so much, and I think it tends to be more women that says, I will be a pain if I ask again for what I need. He will see me in this negative light that just needy, and that's a bad thing.
I think that's one. And I wonder if you also see another one, which I see a lot, which is I'm not allowed to ask for what I want because he'll get offended. And
I'll hurt him.
I see this, not even hurt him. I see this a lot in couples. This is an interesting one. It might be he's hurt underneath the surface, but he attacks. Like the best defense is a good offense.
Right.
So one of the things I'll see a lot with the martyr tyrant scenario that happens a lot for couples when they're arguing about money, the woman will typically fall into the martyr and the man will fall into the tyrant, or if it's a same-sex couple, one will fall into one and the other. What will happen is when the martyr comes forward and asks, wait, what about this with the money? And the tyrant's response will be, don't you trust me? And I've got this, and be very offended at being questioned. So there's a misinterpretation about the questions. And then what happens is they also get irritated that their spouse doesn't show an interest, but they don't realize that they've caused the spouse to really withdraw and not show an interest because they get basically attacked when they do. And it's not conscious. It's a defense mechanism. And
I think the other piece that goes along with that is so much we feel like our partner should know that we have this incredible need for this, and we never share it. And it's a guessing game. And people need to understand your partner wants to know what you need, because we're not going to be able to help each other unless we really get vulnerable. But the risk to that feels so great.
I know, and it's all about the mood when you're making the request or when you're asking for what you need, your tone, where you are, because what happens is people get so defended around these.
And triggered. You see, we look at those as triggers. A tone is a trigger, but what couples don't talk about is what the trigger does to you and the internal dialogue that happens and how you define your partner and your relationship. If only we could have that conversation and not get caught off guard by the conversation, how much more connected will we be?
I know, and it's such a huge thing to ask people, right? Because they are so defended and they don't want to get hurt more. And you're asking me to risk and become vulnerable when they're just going to attack me again. But when you recognize that you're in a much more powerful position when you do stay in your heart, it's way more effective than the others. And, the other approach is not getting you what you want. So that's what's so empowering to me around this is supporting people and having those conversations and having great results instead of having it go badly.
Yeah, we're close to being out of time, but I don't want to not continue this dialogue and talk a little bit about, because you and I had a conversation previously about prenuptials and how that may or may not be helpful in this. I mean, the whole prenuptial discussion may have to be a whole nother podcast. Maybe we do, but
I think so. You just like pointed to a can of worms that is so huge. I would love to come back and talk about that. And I can tell you some great stories about how couples have used the money types to navigate that conversation really effectively. And we're right now in the process of, I have a co-author that we're writing a book on purposeful prenups, on how your prenup can save your marriage before it even starts. And it's kind of a counterintuitive thing, but when you really are able to have the prenup conversation effectively, it can strengthen your marriage and show you that you can have any conversation you need to have when things are getting emotionally loaded and when you're really challenged. And it's not nearly as bad as you think it is. And it's not just about planning for divorce. It's about really being able to talk about what matters to each of you and getting your expectations, your hopes, your desires, out and open before you get married, if at all possible. You can't do it post-nup after you've been married. That so much happens, so much mischief happens in relationships because people don't have these conversations before they get married.
Right. And then what happens is you and I know, because you and I had this conversation also, is that so often what I see in my office is something happens with the couple where there now is a divorce threat or something like that in anger, and no one really intends it. It's really just something that triggered someone and they made a offhanded comment. And now the whole prenuptial thing becomes such a huge topic, it defines the entire relationship
Yeah.
after the fact.
And, one of the things I'll say about that, and I do hope we get to talk more about this, is if you've had a prenuptial conversation and it was painful and it was hurtful and it didn't go well, what happens is imagine that, when you're getting married, you're pouring the foundation, it's still wet cement, and you're really looking at creating this foundation for the rest of your life together. And when you have that prenuptial conversation and it doesn't go well, the seeds of resentment get planted in that wet cement. And then every time that hurt gets re-engaged in some way, and it happens a lot around any conversation about money, ownership, whatever it might be, it's like watering those seeds. And then those create, as they grow and that resentment grows, huge cracks in your foundation. So then when that issue of divorce comes up out of anger, how many cracks are in your foundation are going to determine whether or not you're going to stay together or not. So there's a lot to discover and explore there.
And the other way I would look at that for me is going back to your landmine metaphor, is we then have a landmine sitting in a 500-yard field all by itself. And what we do is create an entire fence around the entire field and have no way of negotiating and talking about what really matters, because we protect ourselves so much, we cut off everything for this little landmine.
Oh, it's so true. And it's so sad. I think that that's why we're both so passionate about this work, because it's so, that pain that causes is so unnecessary. Like there's another option, right? Like
Right.
you have a completely fulfilling and satisfying relationship where you can thrive no matter what you're needing to talk about. And you don't have to be afraid of those things, because you can really know how to diffuse them and how to, build intimacy and connection, even as you're talking about emotionally loaded issues like money.
Right. And then how we then begin to view each other is unapproachable, and no one understands each other. You don't understand each other, why it's so hot, why we can't go there. And if we can get couples, and you do such a wonderful job doing this, get couples to know that it is definitely worthwhile the dialogue, because what it then opens up is a relationship that is solidified, that the two of you are there for one another.
Oh, that's so well said. Can I end with a story about that?
Sure. I would love that.
That's great. Because my book on estate planning for the blended family was inspired by a couple that did just that. So I was working with them because their team of advisors, their estate planning attorneys, their private bankers, worked with them for 2 years on their estate planning, and they would not sign the documents. And so they were referred to us because of the blended family issue, and because of the obviously there was an emotional component there. And I worked with them for about 4 months, and we used the money types. And in the course of that time together, they dealt with 30 years of unresolved resentments, and they fell back in love, and they were able to switch out of a really entrenched tyrant martyr awful and victim loop that was happening between the two of them, which created exactly what you described, to becoming like mutually engaged and thrilled warrior and creator artist and even magician. They came up with a estate plan strategy that nobody had ever heard of or seen before. And they were so creative in how they went about it, and it completely honored both of their values. They were thrilled. And then their family, the two stepkids and the two younger kids, oh my gosh, we had a great family meeting where they were able to talk about the fair versus equal. They were able to talk about um, expectations and also bring up issues that had never felt safe to talk about before. So they all got closer and they were absolutely thrilled with the results. And it was one of those things where, oh my gosh, they went 30 years in marriage with these growing resentments and hurts and exactly what you described, like living outside that fence, hardly connected to the fence came down. They didn't have to worry about the emotional landmines exploding. They knew how to move with each other in 4 months. I mean, it was incredible. So that's what had me write the book on estate planning for the blended family. And I did that with an estate planning attorney. And we use their story and we use the money types to really help people see how they can navigate that conversation and be able to sign their document.
I just want to thank you so much for being out there, really, for being someone that gives to couples and families in the way you do, because what I just love about how we meet people these days, because a lot of it is through social media and different things, and people have so many different perspectives on the value or lack of it with social media. But, our connection, our ability to even have this dialogue is a result of both of us sort of reaching out and saying, I want to find those quality people who really care and are as passionate as we are. And you're incredibly passionate about what you do. And I love that you're out there. And I encourage anyone that has this issue, particularly with blended family issues, and it's so rampant, to please reach out to her. How would people get hold of you, Emily, if they want to? And I'm going to put your information in my show notes, but share a little bit about anything that you've got coming up or doing, because I'd like my audience to really know how to get the help they need.
Thank you so much, Stuart. I really appreciate that. And I have a request because we're in the process of doing our research for the Purposeful Prenups book. Mm-hmm. One thing that would be phenomenal is if anybody in your audience has a story, like it could be a prenup nightmare story, or it could be a prenup winning story, or it might be, oh my gosh, I was just asked to do a prenup and this is how it came down. Whatever it is related to a prenup, we want to collect those stories and also see if there's people who'd be willing to be interviewed so that we can have a really robust book that can help a lot of people with this and have their marriages thrive. So anybody who's listening that would like to send me your story or would like to talk about it in terms of a prenup, you can email me at emily@wealthlegacygroup.net. So again, it's emily@wealthlegacygroup.net.
And I will have that in the show notes for this episode. So if you're driving, listening to this, don't drive and write. Just go to the website, the couplesexperts.com podcast. You'll get all the podcasts. And also when this episode goes live, Emily and I will be sharing the link. Please subscribe to these podcasts. These podcasts we try to get this information out to as many people as possible. And as you know, I also do the 3 Minutes with Stuart daily videos, and please like and subscribe that, because we want you all to really have a relationship that is not just good, but special and significant. And thank you again, Emily, for joining us, giving of yourself, your time, your dedication to the people you work with. And I want all of you to join us next week, because what we're going to be doing is talking about how to turn your relationship from a good relationship to a great one. So take care and stay connected. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Stuart.
Bye-bye.